What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Wobbletop and today we're getting into something a little bit different, something that was requested by someone who commented actually. This guy said, please make a video how to capture a territory slash hideout slash castle in more detail. There isn't a single video about this in YouTube. And somebody responded, yeah, some informative content on hideouts, territories, and all the black zone content that the average solo player would understand. And I feel like I can pretty succinctly explain some of this stuff. I can just tell you now, like territory fights are, it's hard to take a territory, somebody wants a territory, it's gonna be hard to take it. Hideouts, you just place down, and castles, you go and fight for the loot. Now, we'll get into more detail on this as the video goes on, but I just wanted to talk about real quick how recently I was removed from the bomb squad. I'm surprised that my previous video was not dislike bombed, and because of that, I will probably be posting a new video for the Dungeon Divers section here soon, so get ready to look at that. Also guys, there is an insane number of you that are not subscribed to the channel. I'm seeing that almost 98% of you guys are not subscribed, so I'm not calling anybody out, but if you could please subscribe, please do that, and maybe we can figure out more content that we want to make. So as I was saying, we are working on some black zone basics. Sit tight and let's get into it. For starters, let's talk about what a black zone is. When you start out in the game of Albion, you're in a blue zone. You might be going to cities that are adjacent to yellow zones while you're on the royal continent, and those yellow zones will be able to connect you to the red zones. Now, these describe the different kinds of areas that you'll be in. For example, a blue zone, there is no PvP at all. A yellow zone, there is kind of softcore PvP, if you want to put it that way. And then in red and black zones, you can see hardcore PvP, but the two have very distinct ways of how they work. In a red zone, if you want to kill somebody that isn't faction flagged or hard flagged, then you have to hard flag. If you're in a black zone, then you can just PvP with anybody at all times. Now, obviously, the black zone therefore has higher risk, but there also tends to be higher reward. The red zone, there is pretty significant risk for people who do hard flag. Anybody that wants to dismount and attack you as a unflagged player can do that if they wish. And they also don't lose any reputation for it. As you PvP in red zones, or I think as in yellow zones as well, you will lose a reputation for hard flagging and PvPing. In the black zone, there's no faction flagging. There's no hard flagging that has any actual effect on the gameplay. But being in the black zone, any chance that somebody gets, they might want to take you out. So you got to be extra careful and have a little bit of awareness as to what's going on out here. Now, to touch on a couple of the basic mechanics that you should be aware of as you're traveling out in the black zone, because I think it is important to make these known to both new and old players who may not recognize some of these mechanics. If you leave the area adjacent to a rest or portal town, then you will have a bubble for a short period of time, and it also depends on the distance away from it. It's a weird little bubble thing that basically makes you invincible. I highly recommend when you leave Portal Town drinking the blue goo, the invisibility shrine that stands next to doors as you leave. They have these in Portal Towns, and in the rest they'll have them as well. That's the best way to get away from the Portal Towns. You can't cast any spells, and it basically makes it to where you can get up to 2, sometimes 2.5 zones away, depending on what mount you're using or how fast you're going, what route you're taking. So it's very important to be literary with your map that you have at all times. The default keybind is in for north. That button is very useful to use if you're trying to not noob trap yourself. Noob trapping is when you run into area in the map where it doesn't let you through, somewhere you basically corner yourself in a spot that isn't necessarily a corner. It's just like a dead end. So that's something you really want to be aware of as you're traveling around the black zone. It's very dangerous. Additionally, if you weren't already aware of how blobs work, a blob is when 11 players are standing within a certain area together. Now, 11 players can become 22, I want to say, when a blob goes from tier 1 blob to tier 2 blob, and then it's probably like 30 something when it turns to T3, etc, etc. After that point, you're not really concerned about the size of the blob as much the level of their disarray, which is another mechanic that works as a Zerg debuff. Its intention is to reduce the damage output and CC duration, or crowd control duration, when attacking targets with a lower disarray level. So say you are Arch and you have a level 45 disarray, well, your damage is going to be reduced and your stuns and stuff like that are going to be reduced if you are fighting against a disarray level 20 Zerg from another alliance. This is to create a trade-off for bringing a massive amount of players. This allows almost like a comeback mechanic or an underdog mechanic to take place in the game. You see a similar idea being applied to PvE when too many players might be fighting a mob. They will get health buffs and sometimes damage buffs depending on what type of content you're doing. A great example of this are the minions that you will find in territories. Territories have guards, siphoning mages, as well as the sentry mage that protect it and keep people out or draw people into territories depending on what type of content you're wanting to do there. So to break it down, guards have two types. There are melee guards who have swords and shields and they'll do melee damage, and there are crossbow guards or ranged guards that have crossbows. And something you may not know is that the ranged guards will typically have an attack pattern of shooting you twice with normal bolts. So they'll shoot one normal attack, shoot a second normal attack, and then the third attack will be a poisoned bolt that will deal an increased amount of damage and then also apply a damage over time effect. And if you are slick enough, before the poisoned projectile hits you, you can dismount and remount so that your mount does not get dismounted by these guards. Now, if you have more than one attacking you at a time, you might be in a really rough situation, so it might not work out there, but some people can probably pull off like a quick dismount to save the mount so that you don't get attacked by all of the guards at once. And I say this because I know more than one time that I've been aware of the area of a territory being this big red square on the map, and I skirt the outsides of it thinking that I'll be just fine, but what do you know, I'm getting attacked by another guard. It is what it is, it happens, but the best thing to do if you're in a crunch or you're in a tough situation where you're being chased or something like that, you want to be aware of these mechanics so that you do not get killed where you don't need to be killed. The reason I'm talking about disarray right before I talk about territories is because more often than not, you need these kind of numbers to maintain territories. If you want to hold a territory, you're going to want to bring at least a full party, maybe multiple parties of players who are able to fight and hold their ground against incoming attacks, because territories will yield season points by keeping the siphoning mages alive. Now, siphoning mages I can get into now are the mages that will siphon energy from the land of Albion. They'll siphon the magic from the land and create siphoned energy. Now, when you kill the siphoning mages, if you don't own the territory and you start killing the siphoning mages, then you can take them out and receive siphoned energy. This is a slow but effective way of getting season points for your guild, and also a good way of getting a little bit of siphoned energy on the side that doesn't have to be tied to the favor that you have at the energy manipulator. Siphoned mages have a few different moves. They will cause a ice burst that will explode. This can hurt an area of players, so it's best to stay spread out while you're killing siphoned mages. They will also use an ice block effect that then spawns 3 blue ghouls, some like siphoned energy ghouls. You want to kill those ghouls. When you kill them, they drop mana pools. Pretty cool rules right there. And once you go through so many phases of ice block, you will be able to take down the mage and receive the reward. Now, oftentimes guards will be with the siphoning mages, so you might want to slow clear these areas. And also, whenever you start attacking guards, if you start attacking mages in these territories, the people who own the territories will be alerted through in-game messages. So say, for example, you and your buddies of maybe like a group of 6 people want to go and take down some low-level mages for season points. Well, be aware that if their hideouts nearby, then they very well could just pop out and come and mess you guys up while you're doing this. So be very aware of these dangerous activities, but also be vigilant. Be aware. And don't confuse the siphoning mages for the sentry mage, who is the big bad boss of the territories. Attacking the sentry mage is much more difficult than the siphoning mages because there are more guards around typically, and also he has a lot crazier offensive spells, so be careful. And once again, the people who own the territory will be informed when you do this, so be careful about that. But the reason you might want to fight the sentry mage is so that you can declare an attack on a territory. You can't just willy-nilly decide that you're going to go and try and claim a territory, because it's a bit of a process, you know. The game has to know that it's going on, and the enemies have to be able to form up and fight against you so that you don't keep the territory. This is generally the process of taking a territory. You go in, kill the guards if need be, kill the sentry mage, and then spend 2 million silver out of the guild bank in order to declare an attack on the territory. Now, that will be what is considered launching on a territory. Now that you've launched on a territory, you'll be able to tell that you and your guild are going to be able to fight at the next timer that is available to fight. The timer is determined by by the timer of the zone. Every zone in Albion has a timer, and by timer I mean when the prime time of the zone is. You can examine when zones prime times are very quickly by opening the world map using M for Martlock and using the filter option to open it as prime time UTC, and you'll see a color-coded version of the world of Albion that tells you when the prime times for each zone are. And say you're going to, like I often would fight for a territory prime time of 03 or 05, very late US East time, but very good US West time, then you will be able to, at the next available timer, go and attack on this territory. So yeah, there's a lot of things that go onto it. It's a lot of planning, a lot of involvement, but once you get to these higher level guilds that consistently show up on their timers, you will see that they consistently show up to protect their territories, take castles that are also on timers, which we will get to soon. Now, hideouts, going by the list that I was provided, are the next up, and here's the thing, hideouts aren't something that you go and necessarily take over. However, you could theoretically go and smash down somebody else's hideout. Now, this is a bit more complicated, but I'll give a quick rundown today just to make sure we cover all the bases for, new players who don't understand some of the Black Zone mechanics. So hideouts are created when you have a hideout construction kit and have enough space in the zone, and you also have, through the guild, the correct requirements to place in the specific zone that you're in. Some zones have higher quality, some zones have higher tiers, and each of those are mechanics that are based on your guild's ranking and how many season points they've made through a season. And once you reach that threshold, you can put a hideout down in that zone. And you can see this through the season overview. I would recommend making a plan and coordinating with your guild mates to defend a hideout. When you place it down, you have to defend it for about 20 minutes at the time that it's placed. And if you don't have a hideout booster, you'll have to defend it the next day at the start of the zone's primetime UTC. Now that we're back to talking about primetime UTC, it's important to note that you have to defend your hideout on the second day, assuming you have no booster, at the same time that the primetime starts. It's just like territories, but you're defending the hideout from being taken down with demolition hammers. The only people that can bash hideouts after the hideout has been placed, and assuming that it has not been set as headquarters, because if it is set as headquarters, then it will not be able to be bashed at all. But if people who own a territory and don't want a hideout in their zone, they can go and start bashing on it. And each time you successfully bash the hideout, that removes one defense point or one shield off of the hideout. And once it's out of shields, I believe the hideout is completely destroyed. And all items that are inside, at least as far as like the guild chest that is in the center of the room, I think those sort of things go back to the nearest rest or portal town. Now, why might you want to go and place a hideout down? Well, it's so that you can get closer to some territories or castles or outposts that you may want to take over while you and your guild get into this larger scale Black Zone content. As I began progressing into the game, I continuously realized how important it is to have a community of players that will work with you to obtain certain objectives. And a lot of the time that objective ends up being PvP, and winning those PvP fights will yield more loot and stuff like that. That kind of feeds back into the training through PvE and then executing correctly in PvP cycle. That is very much the core function of the game of Albion. Now, there are some menial like labor tasks like mining, gathering, and crafting and transporting through the royal zones. All these sort of things are also things that can be a central part of a player's gameplay cycle. However, some people will be able to actually just farm PvP. Like for the longest time, all I did was play PvP with a side of PvE in order to accumulate silver or weapons and items that gave me silver through consistent, well-played fights. But by and large, this may not be a viable course of continuing the game cycle. So you might want to get into crafting, and that's something I want to kind of go over in another video as I am working that out myself, getting some spec up and stuff like that. But I would be remiss if I did not go over the final point of what we want to talk about today, and that is castles. And I'm going to break it down into two parts. There are castles the big boys. And then there are also castle outposts, which can be a group of size 1 to 20 or more if you want to. It really depends on what area you're in and what kind of forces you're fighting against and how desperate you are for content. Castle outposts are great for small scale groups, definitely less than 20 players optimally. That way you don't scare off any potential fights, and you also don't beckon on any larger groups from interfering with you. Castle outposts are pretty simple. They have 3 waves. The first wave you can pretty much solo with any 1400 IP set. The second wave is a little bit harder. You'll need some sustain to handle that. And then the third wave is the castle lord, and each wave is separated by a minute. So once you kill a wave, you have to wait a minute, and then once you kill the lord, you have to stand in the circle of the outpost and capture it, and that way you can claim the chest at the designated time. Whenever you see on the map that there is an outpost or a castle, every castle and outpost will have a chance to spawn at the same time. And then when the spawning occurs, there is an hour that they will be visible and they can be fought for, and people will constantly fight for dominance over X amount of outposts or whichever castle they want to take. Once that hour is up, it's always going to be at the half hour. Then you will see whoever gets to take the castle, and that's when you start to get the loot. What you may not know is that every single Saturday, there is a EU, NA, as well as an SEA timer for golden outposts and castles, where every single outpost and castle will spawn with a golden chest. And by golden, I mean legendary. It's a great day, great time, great place to get some content in Albion. If you're curious about any of the information that I've displayed here today, go ahead and check the description out below. I've been referencing the Albion Online wiki as I've been telling you all of the information. The only major difference between castles and outposts is a little bit of everything. It's mostly the size of the objective. The castles, you actually have to bring demolition hammers to break down doors that are barricaded, the wooden portcullises. You have to break those down. You have to clear more guards typically. The elite guards are the level 2 guards, or wave 2 guards if you're like in an outpost. There's a lot more of those, and the castle lord does not spawn until you kill all of them. The way that these castles are structured makes it very advantageous for people who know what they're doing, and people who don't know what they're doing and are bad at positioning can very easily be taken advantage of when they are trying to attack a castle. While the fights might be harder surrounding large castles than they are around outposts, the loot can be much better. I think that you can roll anywhere from like 1 or 2 mil to like 5 or 6 mil on green, blue, and purple outpost chests, but you can probably get 4 times that amount doing an actual large castle, which can be a really big payout. But the more people you have to take or defend a castle, the more people that get split with that loot. So it's kind of a give and take there. To all my new players that are joining Albion for the first time, or maybe just enjoying Black Zone for the first time, I would highly recommend you stay away from blobs, stay away from red names, and keep it safe. Try to group up with other players that either know what they're doing or don't mind dying to figure out what they don't know. Take risks, but calculated risks. Be very careful. Keep in mind that you have an inspect button on your keyboard. If you click on somebody's name and press the Y button, it's the default hotkey for inspecting a player. That will tell you a lot about what you need to know when you're dealing with other players. I can go over types of builds and what to look out for in another video, but for now, I just like to keep it at that. A quick message to close out the video here. I know that recently I haven't been super active. I've posted about 2 or 3 times over the last week or two, and largely that's because of work. It's also because I've been kicked out of the squad. So like I said before, it is what it is. And for a while, I was being told that I was going to be removed from the guild entirely, but you know, now it doesn't seem to be the case, and now I'm going to be chilling out for a bit. Once I step back into the Albion sphere, I'm going to be posting a lot more videos again like that. But for now, I'm mostly going to be working on videos that have been helping me get through a kind of boring, work cycle that I've been stuck with over the last couple weeks. Guys, please make sure you like and subscribe, because this video is going to pop off. I put a lot of juicy information in here, and I tried to keep it short and sweet. So please, please, please share it with your friends if you guys haven't figured out how the Black Zone mechanics work. If you have any questions at all, let me know in the comments. I will respond. I'll probably check on a daily basis to make sure, nobody's left with their head scratching saying, hey, what's up with this? How does this work? Because, the more people that are in the Black Zone, the more money I can make. That's how I see it. But anyway, guys, please take it easy out there, and I will see you next time. Peace.